Here we go. Episode 9. This is, I think, take 3 or take 4. I can't remember.
Take 10.
I'm just coming out with a whole load of bloody gibberish today. Right, so bear with me. I'll just try and run this through you. Here we go.
Start again.
We've just been doing a bit of prep, sandblasting. Today we're going to paint it. Tomorrow we're going to measure it. Then we're going to stick it all back together again. And hopefully we don't have too many bits and pieces left over. We'll see, won't we? Yeah, okay, lovely. All right, so this next morning, Sunday morning, just having a quick look at some of these bits and pieces. Mainly they've come out looking really nice. Because I tried to paint too many things all at the same time, I didn't have enough workspace really. Some of the lacquer's not got all the way around, but I can touch that up with some out of a can, just sort of fine, 1,000 or 1,500, whatever. So no dramas. But generally it looks beautiful, There's a couple of tiny little bits of grit here and there. This bit of corrosion that's in the case, I was really struggling with that. But anyway, it's come out looking too bad. You can still see evidence of it. Look, as I said, this is all do-it-yourself at home. It's not, nobody's paying me to do this. I'm not a professional doing it for somebody else, etc. I'm just pleasing myself, messing about in the garage, doing the best that I can. So I'm happy as long as I keep moving. And I think that's the important thing about these projects is you've got to keep moving. Right now, if you look on this bench, all of the bits and pieces, this is a pivotal moment in most people's projects. Once you've disassembled everything, the reassembly, that's the tip of the hill. If you can get over the tip of the hill and actually start to reassemble it again, you've got a very good chance that you're actually going to finish your project. If, however, you stall out for whatever reason, life gets in the way, this is just going to end up in a bunch of boxes and in a car boot in 10 years' time. That's not how this project should go. All right, so there you go. That's my thoughts on it. Now we'll just get back to sticking it together. Adam will be here in a bit and we'll do some measurement stuff. But in the meantime, I can be putting stuff together. Okay, cool. I'm just going to quickly introduce. So this is Adam, my eldest lad. He's far more into his trivia and technicalities than I am. I'm just an idiot that dives in and rips things apart and cracks on. I do break things. Adam's far more meticulous and careful than I.
Yeah, there we go.
Say hi.
Hello.
There you go. So, okay, so what are we doing now?
So I'm just cleaning up the V-blocks because I haven't used these ones before.
Yeah.
So, usual shipping grease that comes on them.
Okay. And then this large rectangular piece of stone, what we got there?
That is just a surface plate. So we're just effectively going to use that as a base to make sure that everything we measure from is flat.
How much did it cost for one of these blocks?
I think I got the surface plate on special for about 80 bucks.
80 bucks, okay. And the V-block?
The V-blocks, again, waited for a sale, and I think they were about 60.
Okay, when we're off. Right, okay. What do we know so far?
Right, so the visual inspection so far, we've had a little look, and we can see that there's a 50 stamped in the top of the piston, so we're on a second over already.
Let's see if I can get that anywhere.
That's in the front pistons. I'd say the front pistons are the lower cylinder set.
Difficult to make out, but
that's the clearest one of the lot. There's nothing indicated on the other set of pistons, so we will have a look at those in a second.
50. Okay. So, and that tells us that it is the...
That tells us that they're on their second bore over of 3.
Yeah. Second of 3. So the biggest we can go is 0.75, yeah?
On the stock linings, yes.
You say there's another company that will do your sleeves?
There's a company in the UK that will bore out the original, and then they will they'll basically install a new steel sleeve.
Yeah.
Which is basically a requirement given that these front barrels are unobtainable these days. So all of the old spares are gone. So at that point, it's new barrel time.
So the front ones, these are different from the rear ones, because the rear ones are ported directly into the barrels, yeah?
Yes.
And the front ones are ported into the case.
Rear barrels,
yeah, which
are basically RD500 LC YPVS barrels.
Yeah.
Front barrels, which are basically TZR barrels.
Yeah.
And the front barrels have the reverse flow, i.e. they're going through the engine casing and then through the crank area and then out the front. And the rear barrels are barrel fed, comes down, back through and out.
Yeah.
That's better for a wider power band.
Yeah.
Whereas that still holds you the same peak flow. I'm sure if they had the packaging constraints, they'd have loved to do both in there, but they couldn't.
There we go. Interesting.
So,
okay, so what are we setting up here? We're going to take some inside the barrel dimensions, yeah?
Yeah.
So what do you call this thing? This is a...
This is a dial bore gauge.
Cool.
And so I'm just using a micrometer that's in your vise. I've set that to the size of the pistons, and now I'm just using a set of packers and shims and pre-building this so that I know I can take measurements.
Cool. How much for a dial bore gauge?
I can't remember. eBay's finest.
Okay, so recording again. I'm just recording the pistons and the crank and everything and just talking to you generally now. So This is just shed chit chat, all right?
Yeah.
So the clocks have got 40,000 Ks on. We're on the second rebore because we're at 0.5 mil of the pistons, whereas you got standard, then 0.25, then 0.5, and the third and final go is 0.75. We are going to do some measurements, but we can see the cross hatching from the previous rebore. So it's a reasonable guess that these, after the second rebore, at, let's say somewhere close to 40,000 Ks, the bike was running, and then for whatever reason it was laid up. And one thing I'm interested in is the pistons. They look quite heavily carboned up. Now the crankshaft oil seals look pretty well toasted, so I'm assuming it was probably burning a bit of crankcase, a bit of transmission oil. Yeah,
potentially.
And that could be why the pistons are so caked up.
Yeah, I was going to say being a little sooty there, maybe. There's a lot of carbon around the out.
Yeah, exactly. The other aspect is on one of the research videos. There's a guy who does a lot of scooters, and he was talking about the carbon around the piston below where the rings are, and he was sort of talking about how you break it in. You know, when you've rebuilt it, so you can either run it in hard or run it in soft. And if you run it in soft, you'll end up with gases getting passed onto the piston like this, and if you run it in hard, you'll end up with a cleaner piston. Don't know if you've heard of any of that. Because back in my day, there was only one way to run something in, and for the general public anyway, and it certainly didn't involve winding the throttle on and off in a very hard fashion. I mean, this guy in the video, if you watch the video, he goes as far as actually seizing the bike. Then he starts talking about different ways to seize the bike, and whether it's your idle jet or your main jet or whatever.
To be fair, after we seized my 350, it ran sweet as a nut. So maybe there is some truth in that. However, it wasn't the intentional way of breaking mine in.
No, you've got to be ready to grab your clutch. Just skidding down the highway.
Yeah, no, that was more of the... that was more just happened than anything else by design.
Now, one other thing I did notice, I don't know if you've picked up in the video where we're taking the cylinder heads off. I'm trying to think which one it was, but one of the domes on the cylinder head was really clean. they're all clean now because they've all been blasted and whatnot. But let's say we were looking at this for the first time, and this one was, you know, the usual sort of a little bit of carbon and discoloration, and this one was immaculately clean. Any ideas what that would be an indication of?
Well, as with anything with carbs, start with the carbs, because
As in too much fuel or too lean?
you're going to get a lot of carbon if you're burning quite rich.
Yeah, so that would be lean, yeah?
No, that would be the
No,
other way.
no, if it's clean, not carboned.
If it's clean, you would be expecting it's running maybe a tad lean, or it might be running about right.
Yeah.
If it's heavy carbon, it might be rich on one side.
No. So out of the 4, 1 was incredibly clean, which I would have suspected is lean, and the crankshaft seals, when they start to go, they can not just let transmission fluid in get burnt, but they can also allow air to get in. So you could be running lean because of that.
Yeah,
and therefore at risk of destroying your engine.
Well, the other thing to remember is that the way the engine is set up on this bike, also you have gearbox-facing seal on 2 sides.
Yeah.
You have a protruding shaft on one, which obviously doubles the area and the risk of seal failure.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have one that is sealed on the block. So of all the places least likely to have a problem, it would be on this side.
On the rear left.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just because it's got a better chance of the seal surviving. It's not a rotating seal.
And if I recall very quickly, sorry, so going back to the Yamaha workshop stuff, so that would be piston 1, that would be 2, this would be 3, this would be 4.
I haven't checked the firing order, but yeah, if that's what they're putting in the books, then it's where it would start.
I don't know if I picked it up in the book. It was in, you know, there's a series, those Yamaha workshop for their technicians that they issued back in '83 when the bike, or '84 or whatever, when the bike came out.
Yep.
So I've put those into that playlist for people to watch, and there's a bit of a, yeah. Anyway, that's that.
I'll probably double check those for myself later on anyway.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
I think in total there's about 22 videos in there now. I've just been collecting as much information as I can.
Cool.
So the one, right. So if number 1, right, if number 1 is the least likely to run lean, is the one that's the most common to run lean. I think you said there were problems associated with the lead crank or the lower crank.
Yeah, the most common failure mode for these, and you can tell that just by the lack of spares, is the TZR-based barrels. And typically they run hotter. They also, yours in one of the barrels is showing the same problem that mine is showing, except mine was done much later than yours, and mine's got deposits on it.
Right.
But you can see that there's rub marks in there from the piston where it's just basically rocking and touching and scraping the sides of the barrel at this point.
Okay, so is that something that I need to take off before we rebuild this, or can I just like hone it up and put it back together with new rings?
I would probably just hone this one.
Yeah.
Looking at how it is, it's not hugely worn, but we'll check the measurements and see how out of round it is.
Okay, so that is the lower left-hand side one that you've got in your hand, yes?
Yes.
And that's the
Power
one.
valve connector in the middle.
Yeah. Okay.
And the exhaust obviously going down the front.
Yeah. Now, I'll have to double check the video, but I suspect it was this one, the rear right-hand side, that had that clean mark on it.
Okay.
But again, means nothing without checking out. So you're looking for any signs of contact on that piston then, yeah?
Yeah, which, I mean, you can sort of see the vertical scrape marks on that piston.
Anything to be concerned about at this stage?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not worn through. At the end of the day, you could replace it. You could also run it. Just depends on how much longer you want it to run for.
Well,
like, it's a wear component, so
it is a wear component. So there is always going to be some wear and tear on these anyway?
Yeah.
So this is just early stages, yes?
Yeah, early stages. It's a wear component. You're going to end up having to replace pistons and barrels, or or go up a size at some point. But if it's not out of clearance, there's keep running until you have to carry that cost.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, isn't it? It's if we're already on the second rebore, then before you get to the point where you're trying to shop around for somebody to re-sleeve your barrels, it means you've got whatever life you've got left in these, plus one more shot at it before you start going to anything complex.
Yep.
So, cranks, I was doing a bit of Google research this morning, so I wanted to talk to people about cranks. And it appears the common consensus or general consensus is 20,000 miles, about 32,000 Ks is likely service life of a crankshaft. You might get longer. You may get longer.
Yep.
So with that in mind, if these cranks and the bearings and the pistons and everything else is all good to go, then you could have anything up to 30,000 Ks worth of life of this before you're ready to restrip it again. Or you could be halfway through and you've got 15,000 Ks left. And the reason I was thinking about that is realistically this bike, when it goes back together, might do 2,000-3,000 Ks a year. So there could be sort of anywhere between 5 and 10 years worth of life before this needs to be redone again.
That's the thing. It's a 1980s two-stroke. Having owned one as my primary bike, I can tell you that you're not going to commute on it.
No,
because
exactly.
kickstarts suck in comparison to buttons.
Well, I'm 56. I'm hardly commuting on a 500cc two-stroke.
Yeah.
So yeah, and likewise, if I was to sell this once I've got the other bike up and running, or vice versa, I'm not going to run two 500cc two-strokes. So one of these would get sold at some point, and whoever's going to buy them is, they're only going to do a small amount of kilometers per year. That's what I'm getting at.
No,
so whilst it may seem okay, we've got the engine in part, and it's easy to change all these components right now. The reason I'm not changing it is not necessarily to save money. It's actually more because they're perfectly serviceable as they stand. They've got life left in them. And realistically, how much life do you need? If you've got 5 to 10 years worth of life left in something, I'm 56. That would take me to 66 on this. Or 61. Anyway.
Exactly. And the reality is, as things get older, not all these parts are available anymore. So, you got to make do with what you can.
Yeah. Buy some spares now. Or you can have an entire spare bike over there, look.
I was going to say there's a bearing that is in this section here, and if that goes, your day is ruined because they're irreplaceable. Would be...
Now, you found for yours, your bearing is knackered, yes?
Unfortunately, I knackered it on removal, and that's where I found out that they're impossible to replace.
Yeah. On the smaller cluster or the larger cluster?
It will be floating behind here on the smaller cluster. Okay. And it is a Koyo... What is it? It's a Koyo bearing, but it's no longer available. It's very similar size to one that's in Suzuki that is available.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Now, Adam, just for the benefit of the audience, we bought our first RD500 probably about 2017, I think. That was probably at the stage before they went completely bananas in terms of prices. Hold on, back in a second. Okay, back again. Right, so back in 2017, bought the RD500 that you currently own.
Yep.
You started stripping it down fairly shortly after, and we are 2024. So 7 years later, obviously wife, kids, and all that sort of stuff, which is, very common for most people.
And a bike's still in pieces.
The bike's still in pieces. Your frame is painted beautifully because you got that professionally done, didn't you?
Yes.
And your engine is pretty much in pieces like this.
Slowly getting ready to go together. However, yes, every new available spare part is basically been bought.
I was talking the other day on previous episode about how that not your RD350, there was another RD350 we bought in pieces, and the chap he'd been storing parts from all over the world for about 4 years. You've been kind of doing something similar with your RD500 for about 7 years now.
Yeah, I was making great progress until I had to change projects and quickly rebuild my 350, and then I got caught up in life instead.
Which happens. That's all good. So you still got it, and you're still going to make some progress forward with it in the not too distant future, hopefully.
However, I do acknowledge I've got about $16,000 sitting in parts in my garage, so I do need to build a bike out of it.
Wow. All right, and back to that bearing. So the bearing on you say it was on the smaller cluster?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure it's the one with the shaft running through it. And that's the clutch release.
Okay, so the clutch release shaft. All right, so that bearing that's sitting in the case there, you said it was similar to Suzuki's?
Similar to Suzuki, except it's a millimeter smaller in the OD, which means that you could either try and get it manufactured with a shim, or
like put a sleeve around it or something.
Yeah, try and put a sleeve, but it's 1 mil, so you're trying to get a
very thin sleeve,
a 0.5 mil thick sleeve to go around a bearing.
Okay.
So there's other risk there, or buy the correct part or leave it in, or don't replace it.
But when you're saying about buy the correct part, you say
sorry, buy the correct tool for getting that bearing out would be the alternative.
Yeah, or just check things whilst they're in there and don't strip them out. But
yeah,
okay. So you were taking yours out because you were going to blast and paint your gearbox case?
Yeah, I was taking it out just so that I could not. I was going to do a full sweep of the bearings, assuming that it's a bearing, should be easily available. But no, it's a one-off special.
That's unfortunate, isn't it? Okay. So if anyone in the comments knows where you can get those bearings, we've got a young fella here. Say young fella. God, you're what, 34, aren't you?
Yeah. I was going to say I've tried Yamaha, I've tried Koyo Direct. I can buy 10,000 of them. so if we need to get lots of them, then I can get a bearing manufacturer to commit doing a run and buy a lot of them. However, outside of that, I can't get a singular bearing.
Okay, cool. Crankshafts. I found out in the States, you were on eBay, there's a supply there. I can't remember the name of it. Hopefully I'll put a photograph of it up from maybe my eBay page of what I've got as a watch list item. But you can buy everything here as a set, minus the pistons, and delivered to Australia, it's like $1,900. And so you've got two of those, that's $3,800. And then you go to Yambits or somewhere to get pistons. Pistons are like £50 each or $100 each. The math conversion for Australian to the UK is just 2 to 1, by the way. So anytime you hear me say dollars, I'm not talking American dollars, I'm talking Australian dollars. So I think it's like, it's $1,900. I spoke to them via a message and they've got 200 cranks remaining. So plenty of cranks for everyone to go at. Now that I think would be an expensive way to go. $3,800 worth for the 2 cranks plus another, $400 for the pistons. So where we're up to now, that'd be $4,400, which is £2,200. And then you've got to get your barrels rebored, and away you go. Oh, plus $400 for a gasket. So if you keep count of that, you're up at $4,800 plus the cost of the rebore for an engineering firm to do that for you. Alternatively, you can buy the center from Yambits, which these bearings here, plus this web and that web. I think does it come with the whole thing?
It's the outer webs. So the center will come as one piece.
Yeah.
Or it will come for you to install new labyrinths. So you might buy that web, that center, 2 sets of bearings and a labyrinth seal, and then the outers. And then you've got to get these pressed on. So this has got to be assembled at 180 degrees very precisely. Then you've got to press on the outers. And again, you need them precisely in the correct position.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall now. I'm pretty sure that what Yambits are selling is the center section. So that's 160 quid. So you need 2 of those plus postage. It was about $1,500. And then you want to buy, on top of that, another couple of outer bearings. Each side the outer bearings, 4 of those. There's probably another $150, $200 worth of bearings there. But anyway, so $1,500, call it $2,000 worth of bearings. Plus the pistons again, so he's got another $400 worth of those, so $2,500, which is way cheaper than $5,000. However, now you've got to go to the engineering shop to get all of this crankshaft pressed apart and re-pushed back together again. So whatever that's going to cost you. I did ask on Perth Two Strokes the other day for engineering firms around here where I could get that done, just as as a pricing exercise. Unfortunately, I ran out of time on Friday, so I never got a chance to contact them and see how much it would be. But the very fact that there are people available that can still do this, now that everyone's going electric, these skills are probably dying off.
Yeah, getting a decent 2-stroke rebuilder is hard.
Yeah, hence the do-it-yourself piece. I mean, the do-it-yourself piece comes from when I was a kid, because everybody used to do this stuff themselves. Up to a point, I don't think rebuilding crankshafts wasn't necessarily the thing done by the home hobbyist, but there were plenty of people around at that time where you'd go and get this stuff done. There's probably a few still knocking about, but I just suspect that this is becoming less and less. There's not necessarily a whole new generation of teenagers going through youth training schemes, learning how to rebuild 2-stroke engines.
He says as his son's measuring up a 2-stroke.
Well, yeah, but you got into this the same way I got into this, was watching your dad sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know anyone else my age who knows even how to do that sort of stuff on a 2-stroke outside of a modern dirt bike, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that's left.
But
really running them.
There's something that a lot of the audience is kind of older. It's being polite. They're the same sort of age as myself, or maybe 10 years older. But something that all of the guys will be able to relate to is the fact that when we were at school, everybody did. This is how you got around. You had your 2-stroke Fizzy or your AP50, or if you weren't on a 2-stroke, you might be on a Honda SS50 or something. But as a kid, as a 16-year-old kid, that was your transport, and you needed to know how to fix it and how to repair it. And Haynes manual was a starting point. And I always remember there was a kid at school called James Brown, and he would go off and do a bit of porting. He'd go to the library, get a 2-stroke tuning manual, learn about that, and then he'd be explaining to us, because like I said, I'm a little bit lazy when it comes to learning, and research was never always my thing. I do try to do a certain amount, but I'm certainly not in the same vein that you are. And James was the same. That guy, he'd go off and learn all about something. He'd explain it to us, and then we'd start taking ours apart and trying to copy it and do the same sort of thing. But like skimming your head, that block that you've got, that stone block there.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh yeah, you can get a pane of glass, you can put some sandpaper on it, turn it upside down, get your block, and then skim it, change the combustion ratio.
Yeah.
You were talking about your barrels on, I think it was on your 350, and you'd use different amounts of gasket to alter the position.
Yeah, I'd effectively tweaked the timing by sticking copper shims underneath the barrels, which came out quite nice for the power I was chasing. Wasn't a top-end screamer, but that thing could pull surprisingly well for a 350. It
was a nice little power wheelie machine, actually.
That was chasing mid-range torque.
Yeah. Not that anybody on this channel condones any of that sort of behaviour.
Oops, officer.
So again, yeah, oops, officer. Okay, so what are we establishing here? What are you seeing?
So just doing some very high-level comparisons. I'll get you right in numbers in a second, but just comparing basically across and at 2 diagonals to see what is the general roundness of the cylinder, and then doing the same thing at the bottom side of the cylinder to compare if there's any taper, if there's any misshapenness. Overall, it looks like it's fairly nice, round, holding shape well. There's potentially a little bit of taper in that the upper might actually be a tad less worn. So That's that damage from that aluminium wear, the rub coming in from the piston,
Yeah.
creeping in down that bottom.
Right. Well, we're going to take some measurements, won't we? And then we can see if it's still within spec. Suspect it is within spec, but just see how close it is or it isn't.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll shut this off right now as far as recording is concerned, because it's been a long one. I'll have to edit it down into something, but yeah, we'll get the measurements, we'll write them on the board, and then we'll talk about that as a summary.
Yeah.
Cool. So just reiterating what we've done so far, we've done the pistons to establish what size they are. We've done the barrels to look for taper and wear and condition. We haven't done the crank so much as what you can do on the crank, which is check it for trueness, which I guess we'll do in a bit. The bearings seem to be in good order, which is your first telltale sign. If you're curious and you want to go into this a little bit more detail, go into the research videos and you'll see guys spinning bearings and hearing grunching noises and bits and pieces. That is definitely the first telltale giveaway. Any other top tips of what to look for, Adam?
Mostly, yeah, follow the clearances that the manufacturer gives you if you're not building a race engine. If you're building a race engine, then everything becomes different. But Yamaha spent a lot of time and effort to try and come up with numbers that would make it through warranty. So I'd start with them.
Yeah, makes it reliable. Okay, right, we'll see you all in a bit.